Welcome to San Joaquin Spotlight, a public affairs program featuring conversations about life in the central San Joaquin Valley. This program is brought to you in partnership between KFSR 90.7 FM and CMAC Fresno. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Today we have two individuals from Fresno State. We have Dr. Matthew Jendian. He's the founding person of the Humanics Department at California State University, Fresno. And we have a lecturer of the Humanics Department as well. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Dr. Jendian, I want to talk to you a little bit first. Talk about what humanics is.
Humanics, the definition of humanics is actually in our tagline. It's preparing leaders for service to humanity. And it's a term that was coined in the early 1900s at Springfield College in Massachusetts to describe a curriculum program that would prepare students in spirit, mind, and body for leadership in service to humanity. And that was really the birthing of a discipline, of a field that was preparing folks to serve their communities in a variety of ways.
Could it be different organizations that they work for? I mean, serving humanity is a broad term.
It is a broad term, and that's partly why we use the term community benefit organizations. And there are many different types of organizations, not just 501c3 nonprofit organizations that are working towards the benefit of their community.
Dr. Simmons, I want to ask you, do students really enjoy this topic? I mean, you know, when you talk to students, many of them say they want to make money, they want to go into business, they want to be lawyers or doctors. But are you finding Fresno State students interested in this area?
Yeah, there are a lot of Fresno State students interested in this area. Because our program is a certificate program right now, not a degree granting program, our students come from multiple disciplines, lots of majors. Undergraduate and graduate students are in our program. And so they're interested in learning how organizations work, how organizations function, how they can be good board members, how even if they take their MBA and go off and attempt to work in high finance, they'll still know how to work with an organization, serve their community. And I'm finding with our students, there's a real hunger to give back something to their communities, to really make a difference where they live, and to change not only people's minds about their area, to help people really find a home, but to do something constructive to make their places of living a better place to live.
Walk us through the first day of class. You're a lecturer with the department. What do you tell people when you first get into class and you're going to introduce this topic to them?
First of all, I tell them that it's probably not going to be like any other class you've ever had, because we don't do a whole lot of lecture. There's not a lot of tests. In fact, I don't think there are any tests at all in this. But we actually place students in real situations with real organizations where they get to observe board meetings, form their own boards, make decisions about funding. They have the opportunity in our philanthropy class and our philanthropy project to give real money to real organizations through a real process. So it's a little bit of shock to them that this isn't a lab experience, this is a real experience, and the organizations they're working with are already functioning in the community, not the ones that we'll just be talking about in class. It scares some of them, and that's a good fear, but others are ready to jump in, ready to do something, because they're really concerned about the issues here in our valley, about our air quality, about hunger, about affordable housing, about homelessness. And our program says that it's a little bit more than just being concerned about it. We're going to give you some tools for advocacy. We're going to give you some tools on how to build good, healthy organizations. We're going to help you not just to do good, but as we say in many of our classes, how to do good well. So they're pretty excited about that process.
Dr. Jendian, why did this department form at Fresno State? I understand that it's a unique program.
It is at Fresno State. American Humanics was a national organization founded in 1948 in Kansas City, Missouri. And they went through a period in the 1990s of expanding to have more partners at colleges and universities in other parts of the U.S. other than the Midwest. And so it's at that point when Fresno State was recruited to consider bringing an American Humanics program to Fresno State. I was hired as the initial director to get the program launched, and we formed a partnership, Fresno State, with American Humanics, Inc. in Kansas City, and our program was born in fall 1998. We had our first course wasn't offered until the fall of 1999. Our first graduates weren't until the spring of 2001. And at first, being a new program, it was about curriculum development, building the curriculum, and it was about recruiting students to the program. And that's where we started. And here we are now over 13 years later, 12 years later, and we've become one of the most recognized programs in that network, that national alliance of campuses. We're now known as the Humanics program at Fresno State instead of American Humanics, so it's just Humanics at Fresno State. And we've kept alive that tradition of preparing leaders in service to humanity through a concept that Dr. Simmons mentioned. I'd like him to talk a little bit more about making it real and keeping it real, because that's an acronym that all of our programming, from our retreats at the start of the semester, to our curriculum, to our internships, to the conferences and workshops that we do and we facilitate. And that's a framing concept that directs our work and how we work.
Dr. Simmons, can you talk about keeping it real?
Keeping it real. Well, that acronym is real. The R stands for relational. That whatever we do in the class and with our partner organizations has to be based on good relationships. And when we're talking about building a board or even building a relationship with a donor or someone who funds us, it's all about relationships. The second is the E, that experiential. That's why we say we don't have any lab projects. We have real projects. And that experience is going into the community, sitting with board members, having a mentor in our leadership class. Then the mentor takes them to meetings, staff meetings, to events, to fundraising events, to advocacy events, and other types of events in our community. The A is that it has to be applicable. So many of the things that we learn in school, you kind of wonder, am I ever going to use this?
Right.
Sort of like taking a 7th grade algebra class, and you wonder, when will this help me in my life? Well, we want to be sure that at this point in a person's education and in our program, everything is applicable. And that's the test that we put our curriculum through. Can they apply it, not just tomorrow, but can they apply it today? And last, it's got to be learner-centered. It's based on what this learner needs to know at this time in their life and with their backgrounds. Because at Fresno State, well, we have a different type of student body. Our students aren't necessarily coming to us from a very strong background in their high schools and coming from communities where they can afford a whole lot of the resources that you might have in other communities. A lot of our students are the first persons in their whole family in generations to ever go to college. And they may be the first people in their family to ever be learning in English. They may be the first people in their family whose families have just acquired citizenship. And so they're a unique population to be in this type of program. And so many of them say, I was the recipient of services from these organizations, and now I can go back to that organization, help improve the way they do things, because I know what it's like to be on the other side. Mm-hmm. And that makes a huge difference. That's why real is so important to us. It's learner-centered. I like to say that sometimes that L stands for being leader-centered, because we don't expect our students to just be good followers. We want to create leaders, and real helps them to do that.
Speaking of keeping it real, you have a program, and I'm fascinated with this program, where students actually sit and decide who gets grants. Yeah. They're right. The grant-making entity. Right. Either of you talk about that program.
Let me first say that with keeping it real, everything in the Humanics program, all the curriculum, all the courses are project-based. So this project-based curriculum takes different forms in different classes. And we've got one pairing of courses, Sociology 183 and 184. In the 183 class, it's the Philanthropy Project. And so in that class, through our partners, with the Fresno Regional Foundation, partnership with Fidelity Charitable Gift Fund and Campus Compact, and several individual donors who've given to the program. Students have overseen the distribution of $50,000 over the last 6 years or so. And that $50,000 has been distributed to about 17 different organizations. And it all happens through that Soc 183 class, where students are researching the issues that are important in their community. They're learning about the organizations that are working on those issues. They're interviewing executive directors and board presidents about how their organizations are meeting those issues, and then they're deciding which ones to invite to submit proposals, and then reviewing those proposals to then figure out where is going to be the best return on investment, not from their own pocket, but for this community. Where are we going to get the biggest bang for the buck and see the difference that's being made on our community? And then in the 184 class, the students there, the project is twofold. One, to go back and evaluate where they gave that money.
Okay.
And what were the outcomes associated with it. And the second piece is to partner with an organization to research grant opportunities and help an organization write a grant proposal. Through the process of making these things real, right, our students have partnered with organizations that have resulted in about $2.2 million in grants coming to organizations in the Central Valley through their participation in that grant writing program. And we're giving them a skill set that they can take no matter what sector they end up in later on. They're learning those skills of researching funding proposals, using grant software, Foundation Center, right, and learning how to write a proposal and the components of a proposal.
It sounds like the students start in one place and come back and circle around back to the place and make sure that outcomes are met. How do you teach that? How do you teach them to make sure that the outcomes are in fact being met?
Because we're based in the sociology department, we have the resources that are around us in doing good measuring and doing good statistical information. But our students are also well trained in observation, how to look at 990 forms, the tax and the IRS forms, to take all of those measures and go back to what the organization themselves said at the very beginning. These are our values, this is our mission, this is our purpose, this is what we are measuring. And the students hold up their own measures to them and say, okay, you've said that this is what you're going to value and what you're going to measure. How are you doing that? And they, as you said, they circle back around to say, these are important measures for you to use. It's evaluative in the sense that it's quantitative as well as qualitative, because they are looking at the numbers, and do the numbers match up? Are you spending, is the return on investment really there? But in other ways, the students have invested some of their own money in this philanthropy project. It's not just what has come from our partner organizations, but in many ways the students have sold coupon books, have done sales, have had events where they put their own money in it. And so the students are pretty keen to say, how is my money being spent? And when you've got a little skin in the game, when you've got a real investment, not just a verbal investment, you start to look very carefully, say, how is that money being spent? And some organizations come in and the students realize they do a great job in their verbal presentation and they tell their story well. But then when the students go and observe to see what the program looks like, they say, maybe they're overselling themselves or maybe they're underselling themselves. And at times the students say, we can help them to tell their story better, or they might have some goals that are set a little bit too high. And so the process isn't to necessarily ding an organization that doesn't know how to evaluate well and measure well. It's to give them the support that they need to do that. Many of our organizations here in the Central Valley were started by people with great hearts, but without a whole lot of experience and information and skills and resources to do good measurement, to do good organization planning, to do good strategic planning. And our program is producing leaders who can do those things, and they don't have to wait for a year or so to get their feet wet in the organization. Our students graduate and their feet are already wet. In fact, many of them are up to their knees in experience with writing grants, sitting with boards, writing RFPs, and giving money away, so they know what it's like to be in an organization asking for money.
And the evaluation process, as he said, and the whole program itself, when it was first founded, Kathy Garabed, who's the founder of Stone Soup Fresno, at the time had come up and said to me, as she was on the advisory council for bringing this program to Fresno State, she said, "Man, I'm so glad that Humanics is coming to Fresno State, because it takes more than a good heart to run a successful, at that time, nonprofit community benefit organization." And when she said that, I didn't realize the full impact of it, but now I do. And the evaluation process that we do, like Dr. Simmons said, we're not there to punitively assess an organization. We're there to help that organization grow and improve. And one of the grants that I'm most particularly proud of in the history of the grant-making process was a $3,000 grant that we had made some time ago, I'm trying to remember the exact year, to River Tree Volunteers. Small organization, all volunteer, really no paid staff. They ended up buying canoes that they would be able to take volunteers down the San Joaquin River to remove debris and tires from there. The team that went to evaluate the semester following went in, and that group of volunteers actually provided the most detail in terms of the numbers of tires that had been removed, the numbers of volunteers that had been involved, the impact on the volunteers and how they felt about their service was demonstrable. So that organization went on to then get larger grants after working with us through that process, and we feel glad. They were recently recognized in the Fresno Bee and in other places for the work that they've been doing along the San Joaquin Valley. And we know that we played a small role in helping that organization get to where it is now. And it's neat to see those organizations develop in those ways.
I always see both of you gentlemen out in the community. You're meeting people, you're talking to individuals. How has the community been to you all?
In many ways, we're one of those quiet, great gold mines at Fresno State that people aren't quite sure what we are. First of all, they don't know what humanics is and what that means. They don't understand, they think that we're just creating more people to go work in a sector that is a very small sector. They don't understand what the third sector, the 501c3 community benefit sector, actually brings to an economy, how a healthy 501c3 third sector in the San Joaquin Valley could change the culture of the San Joaquin Valley. But in many ways, that sector isn't all that healthy here in the San Joaquin Valley, and we're part of making that a healthier culture. We are in a lot of different organizations. We serve on boards, we serve on commissions with the city. We do an awful lot, mainly to say that we have the resources of our students, and what keeps us going is the energy and the enthusiasm and the skill and the diverse backgrounds of our students. They keep pushing us to look at things a little bit differently, to look at things in a different light. I just learned recently in one of the classes when the students were talking about what's really important and what should we be looking at in the future here in the San Joaquin Valley. And one student said, the population of senior citizens is growing, and we need to do some things to really serve senior citizens. And another student very quietly and in great humility said, can we think about what we just called them, senior citizens? Couldn't we just call them seniors? Because not every older person in our community is a senior citizen. Now, frankly, I never thought of it that way. I hadn't seen it that way, but from their perspective, they're helping us change the way we look at organizations, change the way we deliver service, change the way that we serve the San Joaquin Valley. You may notice that we use the term community benefit organization instead of nonprofit. No other sector defines itself by what it doesn't do. Hospitals aren't non-sick centers. Hospitals are healthcare organizations. So many times when people hear nonprofit, they think, well, you can't make any money, you can't pay people well, it's not very well run or very well organized, instead of focusing on what we actually do. Community benefit organizations. That kind of takes the idea that we're not an organization that's begging, but we're organizations that want to partner. And when we can help our students understand how to get out of that beggar mentality, we're not constantly begging for money. There's not ever going to be enough money, and money's never going to be enough to solve the problems we have here. But move them to the partnership mentality. Then things in our valley will start to change.
Dr. Jendian, I want you to talk about what it's like in Fresno, in the Valley, to be a nonprofit organization. We always hear that compared to Los Angeles or San Francisco, funding doesn't come as often. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing.
Yeah, this is true, and I think the term, the part of the emphasis that I want to highlight in response to this question is keeping the focus on what benefit is your organization providing to the community. By using this term, community benefit organization, we're trying to get organizations to think about what it is that they're doing. What's the impact that they're having? And that's something to keep at the forefront of the board's understanding of its task, of its charge, and for the leaders of that organization. And you're right, their funding is particularly challenged in the Valley. The rate of philanthropic giving is not what we see as traditionally measured in other places. But, you know, we talk about in our program, Dr. Simmons talks about time donors as well as financial donors. And so rethinking about how we're using the time of the people who we're working with, the volunteers. And time donors can become financial donors, even if they aren't of the biggest means, right? But they will only do so if they have that proper interaction. And so one of the components of our program is working with volunteers. How do we work with them? How do we, and even changing the language there. You know, do we recruit volunteers? Usually when you get recruited to something, that's not something people are eagerly coming to do. And so we talk about inviting, right? The language around inviting volunteers, recognizing what they're doing and how they're contributing to the mission. So yeah, there are many challenges with regard to funding organizations in the Central Valley, though there are ways to do that, but there are also ways to think about how we're using the resources we have, not just financial, but also the human resources.
In response to that also, having lived in both Los Angeles and in San Francisco and served in organizations in both places, what I find after living in the San Joaquin Valley for 11 years is we're pretty darn creative because of the lack of resources. That when you don't have the same kind of resources that those larger cities on either side of us have, we've created some amazing organizations that delve into problems that other people aren't delving into, that can do things that they don't do in the same way and don't do, frankly, quite as well in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And so our lack of financial resources has pushed our creativity. We just need to keep building the capacity of our organizations to do that. And Humanics keeps coming back to say, how can we help you build your capacity to serve our population here? We're not going to be like LA or San Francisco. We're going to be the best San Joaquin Valley organizations that we can be. And that's who we want to be.
So one of the courses that we have that goes along with that is a course on entrepreneurial approaches to sustainable community benefit organizations. And that course is taught in tandem with our governance, administrative principles, right, and financial literacy for CBO leaders. So like the other course pairing, these two course pairs team up in another real project involved with consulting and getting the students paired up with organizations and assigning consulting teams to organizations to look at their mission statement, their vision statement, their fund development, their 990, their strategic plan, right? And to provide some feedback, an outside perspective on what is going on, what's that view from above, from outside, looking in, and also to get interviews and responses and assessments from board members. And so we can summarize that information, kind of reflect back what the organization thinks about itself. And in that process in the fall results then with in essence, an organizational assessment report that reflects back, reports back how the organization is seeing itself, how an outside perspective is looking in on it, and what are they seeing in terms of its strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And in that SWOT analysis that carries over into the spring semester, into the entrepreneurial approaches class, where we start to rethink and revision the work together with those organizations, creating decision matrices, right, about if you make this decision, right, here's what could happen. If you choose this path, here's what could happen. Developing work plans for prioritizing and addressing where the organization wants to go and working with the organization to move it along that growth line. So many times we get caught up in our own work as well with the day-to-day things that we aren't thinking long-term and we aren't planning for that long-term. And what we are able to do in partnership with those organizations is to help us both focus on that long-term planning.
Dr. Jendian, you mentioned that the first time classes were offered in the Humanics Department was in 1999. 14 years later, has it been successful?
Oh my goodness. It's been successful beyond my wildest dreams. I could not have imagined where we are today back when we were just first starting. I remember being handed a box of humanics materials, curriculum guides and things like that, and scanning through the catalog to find what was already being taught on our campus, what new kinds of curriculum would be needed, how are we going to recruit students to this program. And I'm going to tell you, it's been such a satisfying and rewarding professional aspect to my career to have been associated with such an outstanding group of people, from the students to the community partners that we're working with, to this man sitting right here, who joined our program in spring 1998. We have created, from my perspective, a program that is providing filling an important gap in the needs and demands for professionals in the Central Valley. Whether or not they go on to work in the sector is not as much as important as their involvement as a volunteer, a time donor, a financial donor, a board member, all of those kinds of ways.
And for me, success has a name. It's Darcy Lean, it's Corrine Aguilar, it's Barbara Beauchamp, because they're all at organizations here in the Central Valley and making a significant difference in their communities.
Congratulations, both of you. We are out of time this week on the program. You have been tuned in to San Joaquin Spotlight, a public affairs production of 90.7 KFSR Fresno and CMAC in Fresno. Today our guests have been Dr. Jendian and Dr. Simmons, both with the Humanics Department at Fresno State. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.